Everyone is watching Iran right now. Missiles, blockades, negotiations, that's where the headlines are. But something far bigger is happening behind the scenes, and almost nobody is talking about it. Because while Iran is under pressure, another country is taking a silent hit, one that could reshape the global balance of power, China. And not through bombs, not through direct conflict, but through something far more precise and far more dangerous. A system that China spent over a decade building, a massive economic and energy bridge through Iran, is now breaking apart in real time. And here's the shocking part. No one attacked China directly, but this is where things changed. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important energy choke points in the world, has become the center of a crisis that is now cutting directly into China's economy, its supply chains, and its long-term strategy. And what happened next shocked analysts, because the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. China didn't just lose access, it lost leverage. To understand what's happening now, we need to go back. Over the past decade, China quietly built one of the most important strategic partnerships in the world, its relationship with Iran. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was infrastructure, energy, and long-term planning. In 2021, China and Iran signed a massive agreement worth around $400 billion. The goal was simple: secure energy, expand influence, and create a reliable westward corridor for China's global ambitions. Iran became a key link in China's Belt and Road strategy, a land and energy bridge connecting Asia to the Middle East and beyond. Chinese companies invested heavily. Energy firms worked on gas fields. Tech companies built communication networks. Ports were developed to move oil more efficiently. But the real engine of this partnership was oil. China was buying the majority of Iran's exports, often through indirect channels, creating a steady, low-cost supply line that supported Chinese industry. But then, everything shifted. On February 28, 2026, strikes targeting Iran began to escalate. And this is where the story takes a turn, because despite being Iran's biggest partner, China didn't step in. No military support, no direct intervention, just statements. And that moment revealed something critical. This wasn't a true alliance, it was a transactional relationship. And when the system supporting that transaction broke, the entire structure started collapsing. But the real impact came later. As tensions increased, the United States and its allies began enforcing strict controls around Iranian ports and shipping routes. Tankers were turned back, cargo was intercepted, and suddenly the flow of Iranian oil, the lifeline China depended on, started to disappear. At first, it looked like a temporary disruption, but it wasn't. This was a strategic move, and it was far more calculated than it seemed, because the target wasn't just Iran, it was the entire network behind it. China had spent years building a shadow system to move oil, ships using different flags, transfers happening at sea, cargo being relabeled through other countries. On paper, imports looked normal, but in reality, massive volumes of Iranian oil were flowing into China through hidden routes, and now those routes were being tracked and stopped. But this is where the strategy becomes clear. Instead of confronting China directly, the system was attacked at its weakest point: logistics, shipping lanes, ports, choke points, and the Strait of Hormuz became the center of it all. Nearly a third of global oil trade passes through this narrow corridor, and China relies heavily on it. As enforcement increased, vessels linked to Iran were seized or turned away. The result? A sudden and sharp drop in supply. But what happened next shocked analysts. China does have reserves, enough for a few months. But reserves are not a long-term solution. They buy time, and time was running out. Inside China, the pressure started showing. Factories began slowing down. Production dropped. In some sectors, output fell sharply within weeks. And then came something even more serious: worker protests, factories closing, costs rising. But this is where things changed again, because it wasn't just oil. The disruption affected key industrial materials, chemicals, metals, supply chains tied to global production, and China sits at the center of all of them. When these inputs became harder to access or more expensive, it created a ripple effect across industries: automotive, electronics, manufacturing. Everything felt the impact. And this is where the bigger strategy reveals itself, because this wasn't about immediate damage. It was about pressure, sustained, targeted pressure, and then came another signal: sanctions. Specific Chinese facilities linked to processing Iranian oil were identified and targeted. That message was clear. The system is visible, and it can be disrupted without direct conflict, without escalation, and without ever declaring war. Now we reach the most important question: what happens next? Because the impact is already spreading. China's growth is slowing, supply chains are tightening, costs are rising, and the model that powered China's expansion, cheap energy and stable trade routes, is under stress. But this is where the real concern begins, because this situation revealed something much bigger: vulnerability. China's system depends heavily on global shipping lanes, especially narrow choke points like Hormuz, and if one can be disrupted, others can too. But the real impact came later. Strategists are now looking beyond the Middle East, toward Asia, toward other critical routes that carry the majority of China's imports, and what happened here is now seen as a demonstration, a test of how economic pressure can be applied without direct confrontation. That changes everything, because now the question isn't just about Iran, it's about future conflicts, future strategies, and how global power will be exercised moving forward. China still has options: diplomacy, diversification, long-term restructuring, but none of them are immediate. And that's the key issue. This crisis is happening now, and the clock is ticking, because for the first time in years, China is not controlling the situation. It's reacting to it. And that shift could define the next phase of global power.